Today we are going to do self-portraits inspired by the artist Chuck Close. For our project today, we will be using some paper, drawing paper, sharpie, pencil, a ruler, and a picture of ourselves. To begin, I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to color the back of my self-portrait. The portrait that I'm using is one that I printed off, and I made the contrast a little bit more so that it was, my darks were a little bit darker and my lights are a little bit lighter. I'm using a regular number 2 pencil for this, and I'm just trying to color behind my face. Now if you want to, you can tape your picture so it doesn't move, but I'm just using my left hand to make sure that my picture doesn't move in this step. And I am tracing my face and hair, my outline, all of the important lines of my picture. I'm trying to push down kind of hard when I do this to make sure that my drawing will transfer to the other page. My image will transfer. I'm trying to include the most important elements of my face, of course, my eyes, nose, and mouth. I'm also including my smile lines, my lips. If you want to, you can draw the lines of your teeth, also including some of my clothing information. I can check to make sure that I didn't forget any lines. And you should be able to faintly see your lines on your piece of paper. All right, looks good. Next, I need a grid. I'm going to go ahead and make some marks on the side of my paper using my ruler. I'm drawing a line every inch along my paper, and I'm doing that on both sides at the 1, the 2 inch, the 3 inch mark, 4, 5, all the way down until I don't have any more space left. Then I am making a grid to connect the lines. I'm using my pencil for this. And it doesn't matter if you push down kind of hard because we will be going over these lines anyway with Sharpie later. But I do want 1 inch lines going all the way down my paper. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the top of my paper. I'm going to make marks for every 1 inch and along the bottom as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then again, I am going to draw a line to connect those marks and make 1 inch squares all across my paper. Now I'm using regular drawing paper for this. It's 8.5 by 11, so you'll see on the right side my squares are smaller, but it doesn't really matter. All right, now I want to just use my pencil, and I'm trying to kind of focus on the areas that are super dark on my picture. So I'm going to go ahead and color those in to make sure they are nice and dark. I'm really trying to look for the blackest blacks of my picture. So my eyes are super dark. There's some areas where my hair and my face meet that are super dark. I'm going in and really trying to find those dark areas. This will just help later on when I want to accentuate my darks. It'll make them easier to find. Any area that's super dark, the corners of my smile are really dark, so I wanted to darken those. There's some area right next to my chin and my neck that is in heavy shadow, so I wanted to go ahead and darken that area with my pencil. Just making sure I've got my really dark darks in there. And then my shirt in this picture is dark, so I wanted to just kind of color lightly the areas where I've got my shirt nice and dark up against my really light hair. I wanted those things to show up. Like so. Alright, I'll be using a thick Sharpie and a thin Sharpie for this next section. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the background of my picture. Now, my hair is very light, so for my background, I want to do something that will contrast my hair. So because I have light hair, I want a dark background. And to do my background then, nice and dark, I'm going to take my Sharpie and I'm going to color in square by square with different patterns or designs. You can make zigzag patterns, you can make crisscross patterns, you can have floating shape patterns. I mean, it really does not matter. But I'm going all through my background, square by square, and until I hit the side of where my hair is, and that's where I'm stopping. So some of my squares are not complete squares right now because they're running into my hair. And I want to make sure that I only focus on the squares that are in the background area. So this is everything around where my head is. I'm not doing anything on my head right now. And just the background. So you can see some of my little boxes have checkers in them, some have swirls, some have grid lines, some have floating shapes. You could do floating letters. I was trying to think of maybe some symbols that I could add. So really anything where the majority of the square is dark. I want this to be a great contrast from my hair color. So since my hair is light, my background is dark. If you have darker hair, then you would be doing the same thing in your background, except instead of using a dark a design, you would use a light design. And for my light designs, I'm actually going to use my thin Sharpie, and then my designs will be a lot different. So they'll be, maybe floating letters or whatever, but they'll be a lot thinner lines and a lot lighter marks. So the dark is going first. I'm making it nice and filled in. Really trying to make sure that I get these nice, rich, dark squares. Now every time I do a square, I'm outlining it with my black lines. I'm trying to make the squares next to each other have different patterns so you can see the different squares. And I am trying to make sure that overall the squares are fairly dark. The thicker Sharpie really helps with this effect. Notice I am going on the outside of my head, not touching any of the hair yet at all. you can repeat some of the images. After a while it gets hard to remember or to come up with new ones. So there are ones that I repeated. Every once in a while I just didn't put them right next to each other. Alright, so as you can see, I am now going through and just kind of outlining the other elements of my face. I want to make sure not to lose those with the thick Sharpie, and then now I've switched to the thin Sharpie. So for the thin Sharpie, I'm going to continue with the boxes I've already started. So let's say I was working on a background box and it ran into hair. So I'm continuing that box and continuing the same pattern even, but this time with the thin Sharpie, and I'm making my pattern a little bit more spread out just to make sure that it looks lighter than the background. So let's say on my background I was doing stripes with my thick Sharpie. I'll continue doing stripes on that same square with my thin Sharpie in my hair area, but the stripes will be more spread out. So I'm really trying to pay attention to each square. Every square should have the same like pattern inside of itself, even if it runs into different parts of my body or my background or my hair. And I'm just really trying to pay attention to the value. So is it dark or is it light? If it's dark, I'm trying to keep the square dark. If it's light, I'm trying to keep that section of the square lighter by using the thinner Sharpie and more spread out shapes. So it's kind of a tricky concept right away, but once you get the hang of it, then it's actually kind of fun. And I really like trying to create all of these different images inside of each of these squares. So it's kind of interesting to try to come up with all of these different designs. So you can see dots to dots, stripes to stripes, lines to lines. Even if they're in dark or light areas, it's the same pattern, just lighter or darker. There are some squares that don't have anything, so you can just kind of fill in whatever you'd like. Some of my squares I even did like a little scene in. I think I have a little sunset or sunrise. You can see some of my symbols, like I did a cross or a butterfly. So those are kind of fun to think of too. Alright, now you can see the finished design. I went ahead and did all of the different squares on my face. They are all filled in light versus dark. And that is the self-portrait project inspired by Chuck Close. Thanks for watching, guys.